Hello, and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me for tonight's episode is Drew DeLeon. Drew is formerly the head of digital marketing at Alamo Records and the director of digital at Def Jam. With over 13 years of experience in the music industry, he's led digital campaigns for artists like Rod Wave, Lil Durk, Pusha T, Alessia Cara, and many, many others. Currently, he serves as the co-founder and chief community officer for a global music and tech company called the Digilogue, and he's also the partner and president of an indie music distribution company called MPR Global. The company is best known for breaking Muni Long, an artist who recently took home the Grammy for Best R&B Performance. So, Drew, glad to have you here. How's it going?
Yeah, no, super excited to be here. Thank you, Rachel. I'm glad that we were able to link during Grammy week. Shout out to Shane for the intro in person. Obviously, we've known of each other, so this was super cool. But yeah, just recovering from, I like to say, fully recovered from South by Southwest,
Oh,
and also it was my birthday last week, so it was like a
happy
combination of
belated
that.
birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I really it came from South by right into my birthday weekend, and I was
That's
like,
a lot.
okay, this is a lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Jumping right in. Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
Yeah, I think when it's funny because when I was 25, that's the year when I pivoted careers. So this is around March of 2009. I was working in finance at the time, and I decided to like kind of like make a drastic change. Like I like to say like a 180 and surprise my not only my friends but my family. And I think through that period, there was a lot of just doubt from people. So, but I would probably tell myself to just give myself more grace in that process because I think in moments of doubt, we always want to prove people wrong, and we're going to do anything that we can to just prove people wrong. So I think during that period where I was really just trying to, say like, hey, this is the right decision. I'm leaving finance. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do at the time. I think it took me about 7 months to figure out, okay, if my entry to music was going to be managing an artist, that was going to be eventually my career, but I didn't necessarily know what that was. But I think at the time, give myself grace to just like really just not be hard on myself to try to like prove everyone wrong and just kind of enjoy the process because I think I wanted things to change so drastically, but obviously that journey was going to take some time. So, and then I think from a professional standpoint, when you do decide to make a pivot, and especially in periods where like you don't necessarily have the answers, I think it's important to give yourself time to just also explore various things of interest, right? And you get to understand what you don't like. And I think during this time, I was able to try different things from like acting to, working in different sectors and eventually found my sweet spot in music more in behind the scenes. So from a professional standpoint, like I'm glad I was able to do that because oftentimes when you're um, when you're young, you also have an idea or a skewed view of like what you want to do, but you often sometimes leave things out for opportunities that may benefit you, or like that might actually be something that that might be your career path. So not to be so like narrow-minded as far as like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do because you don't really know. So
Hmm.
I'm glad I was able to like convince myself to like try different things because that's what I did. And oftentimes it's kind of looked down upon like, hey, you're trying to do different things, but I encourage that because you have to like understand what you don't like.
Hmm. And not everything is going to be like this huge success. I feel like more often the things you try are just for your own learning experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to a colleague, she was saying that, she was exploring photography, acting, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's important. Just try different things and you're gonna find, all right, what you don't like, and eventually you're gonna narrow it into like, all right, I gotta triple down in this because I'm actually passionate about this.
Definitely. Okay, let's keep it going. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and you and I both know that it is no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Yeah, no, I think from the secret is that there's actually kind people in the industry. I think there's this persona that everyone in music has kind of gone through the trenches or or is jaded. Um, I have to admit, it is challenging. The industry itself is challenging. The things that we do are challenging because it is a lifestyle. We're at the timetable for an artist timeline, their sense of time
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily meet our 9 to 5 requirements. And I think but as far as the folks that are on the other side of it when it comes to just treating people with respect, empowering people, there's so many incredible communities of folks that you may not necessarily know. And I think your idea of like the industry of music is like, okay, flying private jets or being in these big shows, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
There's this community of folks that really love what they do. They really care about their peers. They care about the artists. It's not always shiny, but it's also probably the most authentic part of what music is all about. And it's really on the focus of just humanity. Like, we really care about each other. And I think um, that's my biggest advice for anyone that's like, I guess, on the fence of, trying to like pursue or enter music because I'm sure they get intimidated by the fact of all these big names and the idea is like, oh yeah, it's a gatekeeper industry. I'm like, yeah, there's parts of that for sure, but there's a beautiful community of folks that really care about each other.
And so, speaking of community, you were part of creating the Digilogue, which is known for its community. So, how did that get started?
Yeah, I think for me, I just was looking for a space to find like-minded people. When I first started back in 2010, I didn't necessarily have an entry point or like to say, a book or handbook on like how to become a music manager. So you kind of have to learn on the fly. And when I was about 6 or 7 years in, around 2016, I was like, if I experience this, I can only imagine what people are experiencing now. So
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to like bring people together that were like-minded, would speak the same language and geek out. Because oftentimes when we talk about music or just kind of geek out about it, anyone beyond our circle of friends or peer groups don't understand what we're talking about. So I wanted to find a group where people felt safe, they felt inclusive, they felt seen. And our first event only had 15 people, but everyone really enjoyed that. And I think that's, in human nature, like we're communal. So I think it's important that we find common interests. And, the Digilogue was going to be that for a lot of people. And eventually we were able to scale over the past 7 years, just being consistent. And I think been able to tackle other opportunity gaps, whether it's like music jobs for the community or just like opportunities for artist discovery and just education. So shout out to the team. They deserve all the credit. I'm just happy have an
Yeah,
incredible
shout out to
team.
the team. Shout out, follow your Instagram, tag it below. And you mentioned artist management. So real quick, I would love to get your perspective on that. Like, you said learning on the fly, and that's usually how most people get started in artist management. What advice would you give to people that are like looking to get into that, whether they're 25 or whether they're like 40 years old and they just don't know how to get started?
You're going to be very excited because you're going to be like so gun ho about your artist. I think it's important to understand that you're going to be working or wearing various hats. So at one point, you're going to be the marketer, you're going to be the finance person, you're going to be the creative director. Through that experience, I think it's important to kind of narrow down like what you do really well, and eventually, as you scale or your responsibilities, to find people that are really experts at this. You don't have to be the expert at everything. You got to figure out what that thing is. And whatever for me, it was digital marketing and brand partnerships. Even though I knew I could produce events or do these other things, I wanted to find people that specialized it or did that really well. And I think to kind of like really just give yourself more responsibility on the fact that you can focus on the things that you do well. And oftentimes I find managers trying to be the best at everything and it's not scalable. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's that. But yeah, that was probably one of my biggest experiences as a manager, is just, understanding like what my true skill sets were. And, as I like grew as a manager, finding people that were really good at, cinematography or just like design. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I was able to learn those trades because I could speak that language.
For sure. Here we go. Last question. Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions, whether for an industry conference, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, there has to be one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be your answer?
Yeah. I think one question I haven't been asked is, what would I be doing, 10 years from now outside of music? And it's interesting because that's something I'm thinking about. I'm not putting myself as, putting a timetable towards it, but there's gonna be a time where I want to kind of pivot and learn something new, but something adjacent to music. So my whole goal over the next 10 years is to like empower leaders and to like really leave a legacy, right? How do I empower folks to learn from our shared values, core values that we've been able to build at the Digilogue, and put them in position to like lead the Digilogue over the next 20 years. But
Mm-hmm.
after that 10-year mark, I would love to like pivot into music, sports, being able to like really support. I'm a big soccer fan. Kind of see like how I can incorporate the bridge between sports and music. It's pretty adjacent. Kind of learn about that world. That's because I'm passionate about that outside of music, and
Mm-hmm.
potentially see how I could support, um, soccer, what they call like football in the States, really grow the game here, but also leverage my relationships in music to like really spread the word. So I think I'm going to pivot into sports. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the uh, I think that's the world that I'm really interested in. But I think for anyone, um, there's always going to be like a next chapter of learning, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm really excited about because I never want to stay stagnant or just like comfortable of where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I think that is so important because I feel like people that are just getting into the industry, or even people that have been in it for like 10 to 20 years, sometimes you can feel like you're just trapped and you can't pivot and you can't go to like a different industry or bring the industry you're at currently into another industry. But don't be afraid. You absolutely can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also you can also come back and also have a fresh perspective. Um, I always want to constantly like figure out ways I can kind of dip my toes in other things and kind of bring back that information. I don't really look at learning as a vacuum and like, oh, everything in music is valid. And I think you need to be able to kind of see like different perspectives and learn about other ways that, people do business, just to bring
Mhm.
fresh perspectives into like what we're doing. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, Drew, it has been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. And to everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. See you next time.
See ya.